Do your adaptive horseback riding students struggle with keeping their balance or good riding position and posture and alignment during the lessons? Or are they constantly pulling on the reins for balance? Or just overall their confidence is lacking and they're struggling with the ability to progress forward in their riding skills and work towards independence? Well, what if I told you that the root cause of all those problems may not be with your student, but with their stirrups? Those of you that teach using mostly Western tack and equipment, you are not immune to this conversation, so don't tune me out just because I'm sitting here in a dressage saddle. Our conversation about stirrups is going to apply no matter what saddle you're in, because too long of stirrups is going to have very similar symptoms and negative outcomes and impacts on our student, no matter if you're in an English saddle, dressage saddle, or a Western saddle. And oh, by the way, I see it all the time that those students riding in a dressage saddle or a Western saddle usually have way too long of stirrups to set them up for success. My name is Saber Popoli, and I'm the owner and founder of Hoof Falls and Footfalls. And through Hoof Falls and Footfalls, I'm on a mission to help educate, equip, and empower fellow adaptive riding instructors around the globe. Now, during my years of teaching both adaptive lessons and traditional lessons, I will fully admit that setting stirrups to the correct length is a challenge. It's a challenge in traditional lessons where we just have traditional students who likely don't have any type of formal diagnosis or disability, but it gets extra challenging in the adaptive riding world when now we're not just working with a human body riding on a horse and setting stirrups appropriately, we're now having to factor in that that student might have their own unique physical, cognitive, and emotional abilities that could come into play when setting appropriate stirrup length. And I've seen it happen so many times that depending on the student's diagnosis, whether they're higher tone and stiff and tight muscles or lower tone, looser, slouching, arthritic, having asymmetries in their body, difficulty with balance, riding super tight and crunched up, whatever it might be, there's an assumption that longer stirrups are always better. And usually they're not. They're actually usually the opposite of what we want to do. And I'm going to explain why that's the case in this video, and then also those common symptoms and problems that your student might be encountering that are probably rooted in too long of stirrups. And I'm going to go through this in a rough order of kind of most common problems to least common problems or least frequently seen. But I am going to bring up the least frequently seen ones because I have seen them so many times during my years of teaching, but they're things that you may not automatically tie or associate with too long of stirrups that I do want to give this information to you during this video to hopefully maybe help troubleshoot those less common problems we might not think are rooted in stirrups. So let's jump into the most common problems that we're going to see. So most common problems when my stirrups are too long, and yes, my stirrups are too long right now for me, is that we're going to see this ski position like this. So legs are pushing forward and out so I can try to keep my foot in my stirrup. And then my pelvis tips back into what we would call a posterior seat. And then from there, my upper body is hunching forward and my head is coming forward too to help counterbalance my body so I don't go tipping backwards, which is what's going to happen if I keep my head over my shoulders. So this ski position here, that rider could be just kind of pushing flat-footed out, or they could even be tippy-toeing if their stirrups are extra long. And you're probably going to see them kind of bracing out against that saddle here, and feet are going to come out and they're going to get just kind of stiff and tight and not be able to move well with that horse because they're kind of either consciously or unconsciously prioritizing trying to keep their feet in their stirrup. So that ski position can create a lot of troubles. And also, if my stirrups are too long, it's going to be hard to have appropriate foot position. So you might see riders riding with kind of that heel up because their stirrups are too long to actually keep a flat foot, or that slight givey heel down, which is going to set them up to be able to move well with that horse once we get going and doing walking and trotting and 2-point and all of that. Foot position, ski position, that leg is going to get kind of bracy. And then this pelvis position here too is setting up this whole domino effect of my upper body. Now, with this whole position, this is then going to lead into problems with upward transitions. So if your student is struggling with upward transitions, and what's happening in those upward transitions is they're getting left behind the motion, so that horse moves forward and then they're left behind. It could be that their stirrups are set up too long. We're having this domino effect of the body, and they're not able to set their body up appropriately for those upward transitions. Or maybe you prompt them before, but it's just this chronic problem of them getting into this slouchy ski position. Could be that it's that stirrup kind of making this problem happen again. So with getting left behind in those upward transitions, and I'm going to have to be careful here that he doesn't move back, they're going to have the instinct, hopefully, to not fall off the horse that they're on. And so how they're going to not fall off is they're probably going to use their reins, and they're going to pull on those reins to use them for balance. So if your student is struggling in upward transitions, they're kind of getting left behind, they're slouchy, and they're pulling on reins to try to stay balanced, or even out walking, they're trying to use their reins for balance, it could be that their stirrups are too long and they're not able to maintain good balance and good posture and alignment. That's going to set them up to learn how to ride without having to use their hands for balance and security. A little less common there of the balance and security piece could be that they're grabbing onto the saddle and they just are holding on and don't want to let go. But I usually see that trying to use the reins is the more common of those two, okay? So upward transitions can be a problem, but also downward transitions can be a problem as well. So in the downward transition, when we're doing that downward transition, if I'm sitting like this, I might be saying for the horse to slow down with my words, I might be using my reins, my legs may not be squeezing, but my seat is still telling my horse to go forward. It can be more of like a driving or like a hot seat when we're in this position from having those long stirrups, okay? So if your rider is having trouble slowing down that horse, it could be that their seat is in that driving position. Now, this position, when that horse slows down, they're probably not gonna bobble forward as much because we're already braced out against it, but we're not gonna be set up to have a soft, gentle, smooth, appropriate downward position or downward transition where we're able to use our voice and our body appropriately and using reins last, okay? So those are the most common things that I see riders struggle with, or like the symptoms when we're talking about stirrups that are too long. Let's move on into less frequent things that we might see, but are definitely worth a mention because of how often I've seen them happen and then finally got my senses about me and pinned it down to, oh, actually it's the stirrup length. So something that can happen quite often with our students that have sensory processing challenges, usually sensory seekers, is that if their stirrups are too long, they're gonna have wiggle feet. So they're gonna, and I'm gonna have to softly move mine around so he doesn't move, but they'll have wiggle feet here and be playing around kind of with that stirrup on their foot because they're not able to put enough pressure down to maintain a good foot position and have more of like that grounded, comfortable, secure feeling we get when we actually do have appropriate length stirrups. So if you see riders playing around with their stirrups and wiggling around and all of that, could be that the stirrups are too long and they're facilitating that sensory seeking foot play with that stirrup. Another thing could be too is that that rider just completely takes their foot out of the stirrup and they keep losing it, either purposefully or unintentionally, but purposefully could be because that stirrup is just kind of hanging there. And that weird feedback of it being too long and them not knowing how to keep it in, it's just easier for them to take their foot out. So that's what they do. So those are two things. If you're noticing your students doing that with the stirrups, don't assume, oh, it's just them being wiggly. It could be the tack and the equipment and that feeling, and that's what is the most comfortable for them to do. And we might be able to lessen those things by adjusting our stirrup length, okay? Another common thing that we might see is hip discomfort or kind of discomfort along the crotch or the inner thigh area because the stirrups are too long and we're not able to distribute our weight better throughout our feet and the rest of our legs and kind of take a little bit of that weight off of our hips and our seat bones that are pushing onto the saddle, because the stirrups can weight bear a little bit of that, the weight of our legs, to lessen the pressure on our seat area. For riders that might complain of the hips and the seat bones being uncomfortable and the long stirrup kind of being that root issue of it, could be our older population of riders that have arthritis in their joints, could be riders that are either too tight or too loose and just not able to kind of distribute that weight a little better. So just keep an eye out for that, and don't assume that just because a rider is tight or spastic that long stirrups are going to be the best for them, because it could actually be causing too much strain on their muscles and joints and ligaments. So we might actually want to offer a bit more support with those stirrups versus going long and trying to lengthen them out to what we think is more appropriate length for the traditional riding position versus what actually fits our students best. Another thing that you might see, which I kind of mentioned, is that grabbing onto the saddle or just overall lack of confidence, because that lack of confidence could come from whatever warning signals are going off in their brain of, hey, I'm not balanced, something's not right, I don't feel secure. And so then our natural protective instincts kick in and we go into that fetal position, we grab on and we kind of close up. So long stirrups don't necessarily mean that rider is going to lengthen and sit tall and grow taller and longer through the leg. It could actually be causing the opposite because of those warning signals going off inside their brain that they just may not be aware of feeling or know how to explain. So we've got to be aware of that as well. So that lack of confidence, grabbing on, and then also with this longer leg, the more open our hip joint is, the less stable our leg is, and it can move around more. The more bend we have in our hip, the more stable this joint is going to be, and it can help us feel more secure and have less wiggle room and range of motion in that leg. So the actual shortness of that stirrup can play on the amount of security that rider is going to have in their leg. That just kind of naturally happens as we're building good posture and alignment to the ability of that student we're working with, of course, keeping in mind their own unique physical and cognitive and emotional abilities. I also want to end this little chat here with a reminder that stirrup length needs can and usually will change throughout a lesson, especially when we're working with students who have different tones. So those that are higher tone or those that are lower tone, because those that are lower tone, as we start riding around and we get muscles engaged and we're working on balance and posture alignment, we might actually kind of shorten up a bit and tighten things up. And so we might need to shorten those stirrups because of how the body's reacting. Definitely seen more with lower tone. With the higher tone students, they might either get tighter with the movement of the horse a touch and we need to adjust stirrups, and as we're doing trotting or as we're doing 2-point or whatever it might be, but it could also be that they loosen and lengthen and we do need to drop it a hole. So we want to make sure that we're looking and watching our student as their bodies react to the different things that we're doing in our adaptive riding lessons. And I don't have a perfect recipe for, if this student is high tone or low tone, or if you do, a walk or a trot or a 2-point, you have to watch the student that's in front of you. The weather can come into play, the horse's movement comes into play, the different riding skills that you're practicing all impacts that. So just keep that in mind, but don't be afraid to adjust those stirrups mid-lesson if you need to, if you notice that they're actually kind of too long as you get going, or you notice a student struggling with 2-point or with trotting or posting work or any of these other things that we talked about. Maybe give it a try and think about shortening those stirrups up a bit to see if it helps. So let me know. I'd love to hear in the comments down below what your experience has been with students that are riding with too long of stirrups. What do you commonly see? Have you encountered a situation where your student was struggling with all the things I was talking about, or one or two of the things, and you shorten the stirrups and it was like, oh wow, it's fixed, yay. If so, share that story below. It's a great place to share information and let other instructors learn and grow from each other, because that's how we grow and develop and get better as instructors, is learning from each other. Also, make sure you drop a comment down below if you liked this information, and if you did like this information and got something to take away from it, please give a like, a subscribe, a notification, a follow, whatever platform you're on. If you could do that, that is much appreciated, because it helps push this information out to more instructors. If this is on YouTube or a podcast, you are more than welcome to share this information with other instructors. So share the link, send it out, use it as instructor training and continuing ed. This is yours to use as you need to. Also, let me know down below if there's another question you have or other educational topic as it relates to adaptive, or also called therapeutic horseback riding, and I can go ahead and bump that up on my list of many topics I have that I want to go ahead and deliver to you guys through YouTube and also through the Intuitive Instructor Club. So if you like videos like this, check out the Intuitive Instructor Club. You can find it on my website, hooffallsandfootfalls.com. And the Intuitive Instructor Club is an online learning platform that is just for adaptive or therapeutic horseback riding instructors and other equine assisted services professional. And at the time of recording, I have over 190 videos in there. So there is a ton of content and information, and there's a lot of information in there that has specific horses and actual lessons with instructor self-evaluations and discussions, stuff that we just can't put out here on YouTube or Facebook or the podcast. So make sure you check that out, hooffallsandfootfalls.com, and join the Intuitive Instructor Club. So until next time, thank you so much for joining in, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Hoof Falls and Footfalls channel.